back, week 10, this is side mount. And so here at the North Star Academy, we kind of categorize Jiu-Jitsu into maybe 2 or 3 basic positions, okay? So if leg locks notwithstanding, right? If we're not talking about lower body attacks, we're just talking about kind of like white belt Jiu-Jitsu, we have guard positions and we have mount positions. That's it, guard and mount positions, and they all share certain common things. It's kind of like playing football. You know, when you receive a punt, you're on your end of the field. That's kind of like being in a bad position, and then when you cross the 50-yard line, you start to get into scoring opportunities. And so when somebody's inside of our guard, we're past the 50-yard line, we can score. And when we pass somebody's guard from top, we're also past the 50-yard line and we can score. Okay, so the side mount positions, we have what we'll call turtle side mount, sprawl side control, 45, north-south, knee on belly, kesagatami, reverse kesagatami. Don't worry too much about knowing what all those positions mean. This week's lesson is more about showing you what they all have in common and how we maintain control from the top mount that's not a full mount. Okay, full mount's a little bit different. You will likely stumble across some of those previously mentioned positions just sort of on accident if you sort of follow the concepts, okay? So what happens is if you understand a lot of concepts in Jiu-Jitsu, you're gonna end up discovering a lot of techniques simply because there's so much variation on all the basic themes that you end up kind of being able to innovate on the fly if you sort of follow the basic rules, okay? And so everything's already been done, nothing's new in Jiu-Jitsu really, but for you, since you may have not seen something before, you may discover it, and then only to find out that 10 years ago somebody won the worlds using that same sort of concept, okay? So Jiu-Jitsu is crazy. All right, let's get into sort of side mount control or mount control. It's all about controlling the hips. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. We talk about feet, knees, and hips. So when we're passing the guard, I clear the feet, I clear the knees, I connect to the hips, and I control the hips. And so side mount control is more about controlling the hips and preventing their ability to recover guard than it is about sort of exerting pressure, being rough, or attacking. And so it's sort of, the way I see it is we use our guard passing to bash the door open, and then we use our side control pressure to keep the door open. Okay, so we want to just sort of maintain position rather than necessarily think about smashing or progressing, okay? I know it sounds a little weird, but you'll sort of see this in action. So Chris is gonna go onto his back. He's gonna have his head facing my left over here. We're gonna start in our basic side control position. I call this turtle side control because we're gonna be in a really tight position. My knees are in, my elbows are in. One basic concept here is I always wanna have pressure or connection to the inside hip. So for example, my right knee right here is gonna be right next to his hip, so I always wanna keep my knee and his hip connected at all times. If his hip moves, my knee moves, etc. Number 2, whenever possible, I wanna keep them flat. It just makes it easier for me to be heavy and keep my weight on. Now, it's not always gonna be possible, and that's why we transition and change our position. And then number 3, anytime he gets a frame, which is basically sort of like a shin or a forearm in between our bodies, I want to make sure that I don't put too much pressure directly into that frame. That only serves to make it stronger. I always want to change my angle a little bit and get around the frame. And so top control is a lot about transitioning. Okay, so we're going to start with our our turtle side control. I'm going to have an underhook, crossface, lock those hands here. Underhook and crossface, my chest is on chest. Anytime I want to control something, I put my chest on it. Now my underhook elbow and my inside knee, I want to connect them to his body. So I'm squeezing my elbow in and I'm driving my knee in here so that his hips are pinched. So in this position, I'm not trying to be as heavy as possible. I'm trying to be as constricting as possible. And you'll notice I'm going to keep my weight to the knee that's closest to his head. The reason I do that is when Chris starts to shrimp out, I can follow him with my inside knee. Just like that. Now you'll notice if this knee is super heavy on the mat, it's going to get stuck. So now I'm going to keep this knee super heavy on the mat, and when Chris goes to shrimp away, he creates a lot of space. He disconnects his hip, inserts his knee like a wedge, and then starts to thread his feet back in. Hips, knees, feet is how we recover guard. Okay, so I always want to keep the inside knee light and driving forward. So one more time in the side control position here. I lock everything. My elbow and my knee here are going to connect.
I'm gonna lean a little bit heavier to the head, and I'm just gonna follow his hip with my knee when he starts to shrimp up. Excellent, okay?
So that is our turtle side control. We just want to be tight. Not a lot of attacking opportunities from that position, but it's a great way to establish your mount and start to plan your attack. All right, welcome back. So now we're going to talk about how do we use transitions in different side mount positions to stay one step ahead of his frames or to sort of counter his framing attempts. And so framing is basically any forearm, generally forearm or hand or knee or foot, used to sort of create open space. So if you think about like this door frame right here, it's a structural component that prevents the ceiling and the top of the wall from collapsing onto the floor. So like a door frame or a window frame is basically a structural component that supports clear open space. And so the less connection I have to Chris, the more open space there is between us, the less control I have, and the more room he has to move around. Hopefully that makes some sense, right? So anytime he starts to establish and build those frames, I want to kind of knock him down. I've never played Minecraft before, but I know you build stuff and then there's little green guys that come and try to knock him down. You want to be like those little green goblins and just destroy everything, okay? Anytime he does something, you got to destroy it. You can't let him get away with building even the smallest frame, because that could be the first part of your demise, right? You know, Jiu-Jitsu is so small. So let's get into this turtle side control. You're going to see that he's going to use his near side elbow. He's going to wedge it into my hip and he's going to create a frame. So
as I have this turtle side control here, maybe for whatever reason I'm unable to stop his frame, so he wedges that forearm in and he's able to use that to sort of escape his hips, right? Create some space, and now I'm fighting his guard recovery. So as soon as I feel that elbow come inside, actually Chris, let's skedaddle this way. Excellent, cool. So as soon as I feel that elbow come inside, my crossface hand goes right to the tricep, and I'm going to lift and switch my hips, okay? So I'm being nice to Chris right now. I'm leaving my butt on the mat, but I want to be controlling the tricep here. My inside leg is in the armpit, and remember, we always want to control the armpits. Outside arm is controlling the armpit, pulling up, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on Chris right now. I take my hips off the mat, and I try to compress his ribs. So I'm squeezing everything in tight. Excellent, okay? So that's using Kesagatami. Again, we're in turtle side control. Boom, switch, and I get into the armpits. This is our Kesagatami position. From here, we have a lot of attacking options. We have basic arm bars, boom, key locks, boom, all sorts of cool stuff. But the concept here is more that we're staying one step ahead of his frame. So even if I don't want to attack from Kesagatami, I can always switch back into a standard side control, and I've successfully destroyed his frame, okay? Now, if he tries to frame on the far side, so let's rotate our head over here. Sometimes this frame is going to come underneath the neck, okay? So, yeah, we'll just do one frame here, Chris. We'll do the second. So he's got one frame in here on the neck. So again, if I try to push down here, I just make this frame stronger. So instead of fighting the frame, I'm going to transition my way out of it. My cross face reaches over, grab the armpit, underhook, slides back, blocks the hip. I'm going to sprawl and just walk to north-south. Okay, so from here, if Chris tries to use his frame, it doesn't have a lot of, the angle is wrong, he can't really use it, and if he really starts to extend that arm, he's putting himself into some bad positions, right? He's separating his arm from his body. So we'll use a north-south transition to deal with that neck frame. So again, he's here, he starts to lock that in, and immediately I switch. I'm connecting to the hip, sprawl and circle. I can always circle back, right? And that frame is sort of out of play, at least for now. And again, he's gonna start building stuff and we're gonna break it down. It's never ending, okay? Lastly, sometimes, and often, especially if the guy, your opponent is good, they're gonna get both frames in. Now that can be pretty tricky, okay? So I'm in my turtle side control. He gets both frames, hip and neck. Now if I try to fight this, he's just gonna float me and easily start to insert his knees and feet, get his guard back. So as soon as I feel that pressure, I'm gonna go right into my knee on belly position. So this takes a little bit of finesse and practice, but as soon as I feel that upward pressure, he gets that in, and he starts to push, I let him lift me up, and I just slide my knee across. So from this position, if he's pushing on me, he can't really do too much, and his arms are now super vulnerable, right? His neck is exposed, all that stuff, right? So just to recap, we'll recap. Hip frame, neck frame, dual frame. This is called like a frame busting sequence, okay? Hip frame, tricep, Kesagatami. Neck frame, reverse the arms, north, south. Both frames, knee on belly, okay? Now obviously from our knee on belly position, we want to have some control here, but just by adjusting my position and the angle of my pressure, I can take away his ability to frame and always stay one step ahead, all right? All right, welcome back. So we're gonna do a really quick transition here. So a lot of the side mount, what I'd call side mount positions, those transitions are relatively simple because we're not really going to put our legs in the danger zone, which is, you know, over his legs or anything like that where I can get recovered, where I can allow him to recover his guard. So a lot of my transitions are gonna be moving around the clock, you know, in the direction of his head, steering clear of his legs. But anytime I transition into mount, I always run the risk of getting stuck back into half or even full guard. So it's really important that we can't be sloppy with our mount transitions. It takes so much work. I mean, consider this. You gotta take somebody down. You gotta pass their guard. You gotta establish side mount. And then you do all that work, and from there you do a sloppy mount attempt, you get put back into guard. It's just a waste of time. So we really want to be tight, controlled, and conservative with how we mount. Now, think of it this way, right? Chris can't put me into half guard if I don't have legs, right? If my leg is cut off from the knee down, there's nothing to grab onto, there's nothing to hook, okay? So when I go from side control to mount, one of the easiest ways is to sort of do a knee on belly variation, spike the mat, and we're good to go. We're gonna end up in that low mount position we talked about last week. Okay, so in my turtle side control here, I'm super tight. Notice my inside knee is light. I always keep my weight towards the head. I'm gonna slide that knee across the belly. I keep my ankle to my butt. So right here, my ankle's to my butt. I don't wanna get sloppy here where he can hook it, right? So I slide across to keep pressure. I spike the mat, open the heel so he can't grab it, circle underneath, lock my feet, and get into that low, heavy, and wide mount position. It's really, really, really simple here. Key points are maintain good shoulder pressure, maintain good chest-to-chest connection, and keep your ankle to your butt. Just sort of take away your leg. One more time, very simple. This is one of dozens of ways to mount from this position. I'm heavy, heavy, heavy. Inside knee slides across the belt, ankle to butt, spike the mat, windshield wiper open, close, low and wide. So if he starts to buck and move, try to fight this position a little bit, I can get my points and then start to work into that high offensive mount, hopefully getting a nice submission win, all right? Last thing we're gonna do today is our bread cutter choke. This is just one of many lapel chokes from this position. Now, in our intro program, we're not focusing too much on lapel work, simply because we want to talk about skills and concepts that sort of transcend gi or no gi, just jiu-jitsu in general. So the gi is sort of this double-edged sword. It's this indestructible jacket that's made to very specific specifications so it doesn't rip, and it also can, you know, put you unconscious in ways that maybe a flannel shirt or a t-shirt can't. So it's kind of like a fantasy uniform in some ways. It doesn't really exist in the real world. But when we're doing jiu-jitsu within the gi, that lapel becomes essentially a really durable rope around your neck. And so it can be used against us, and we can use it against our opponent. So we always got to be dealing with the
with the lapel. So we're gonna use the lapel and the gi right now to finish what's called a bread cutter choke. All right, this is very simple. We're gonna go off of a neck frame, okay? So my opponent's going to get that neck frame that we talked about. I switch my arms. I go to north-south. Now from here, this hand is going to grab the shoulder. I'm grabbing the shoulder. I'm not grabbing inside the lapel, I'm grabbing the shoulder itself. This far arm just reaches into the armpit and grabs the armpit right here. So I get to north-south, I bust the frame, I circle back. Notice how I just drop the forearm across the neck and squeeze. We'll show that again, just the mechanics of that choke. This hand is on the shoulder. This hand is underneath the armpit. And the reason it's underneath is I want to be able to keep him from rolling into me, right? So he can relieve the pressure by rolling into me. So when I lift up here, good, try to roll into me, Chris. I'm keeping him flat with this grip. So I got to keep this grip to try to keep him flat. We drop the forearm over the neck. We lift up. We sprawl. A very powerful choke, okay? Biggest mistakes people make is they try to get too deep into the lapel. It's literally right on the shoulder, right under the armpit. Okay, one more time. We're in side control. He tries to frame my neck. Boom. Right, this is just one of many setups. I switch, I bust the frame, I circle the north-south, get my grips, circle back, drop the hammer. One of many lapel and gi chokes. You can really go down a rabbit hole with these things. They're very, very powerful, okay? So keep in mind, always gotta mind your gi and your opponent's gi, okay? So that's side control 101, basic concepts we want to adhere to. Controlling the inside hip. So whatever hip is closest to you, maintain connection there, because theoretically, if you're connected to that hip, they can't create enough space to get that knee and that foot in. So it's all about connection of the hip. It's number one. Number two, whenever we can keep them flat, that's always better. Number three, if they're framing, don't fight the frame, transition around it. So we should constantly be moving in our side mount positions. And that's why I don't like to identify too many separate positions, because people think that the transitions are these big efforts. It's just a slight change of angle and pressure. And the reason we change the angle and pressure is to stay one step ahead of their defense, okay? And while we're doing that, as we get deeper into these positions, you'll notice that the pressure on the inside hip, that first rule, never is relieved. There's always pressure there, okay? So if you can maintain pressure on the inside hip, change your angle away from the frames, you should be essentially unregardable, okay? So Chris, Jackson, see you next week.